It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Okay, that wasn't so good. I am trying to sing the Feedback Friday song more properly, more proper lately. It's not necessarily going so well. I subscribe to the Steve Martin school of there is a difference between singing properly and singing funny, and I'm trying to find the happy medium between the two. That means nothing, just an aside. I'm just getting back into doing these sort of live videos after working on Lady Bits for a bit. It's always a bit of a rough landing for me. I've always, this is just a thing you're learning about me because I'm such a generalist in terms of entertainment. I'm one of these people that sort of has to re-immerse in a particular skill to be quick with it. For people who don't do this stuff, improvising and working with a script, with me, it's like two different, not just parts of my brain, but like brain function as well, like brain activity. And it's sort of like the difference. This is not entirely accurate, but long distance run versus a sprint. In order to not sound like you're reading when you're reading a script, at least for me, you sort of have to write it and practice and practice and practice and then forget it. So when it's coming off the prompter, it seems new instead of just regurgitated. Because if you are an awkward reader or sort of a dead reader, people don't know exactly what's wrong, but they know something's not natural feeling, it's artificial feeling, and people have a really bad reaction to that. And so when I'm doing a lot of improv stuff, I have to practice my scripted stuff. That happened when I was doing Ed and Red's Night Party. When it was all primarily improvised, I had to go back and practice my scripted dialogue again because, man, it sounded so stilted. But then there hasn't been a time recently where I've done a lot of scripting, but when I come off of a Lady Bits episode and I come back into these, it feels weird. Like I feel like I'm constantly grasping for words. Because like I said, like reading, it's almost like this part of my brain is working. Whereas when I'm off the cuff like I am right now, it's like back here. That's probably nothing scientific about it, but that's sort of where I'm at. But anyway, your feedback. Let me give you a bit of a behind the scenes of this episode as an introduction to your wonderful as usual feedback. I understood that this was a change of pace that was deliberate, but it was also a deliberate risk because, yes, it was a totally different format. There was no versus mode, which some people, even though they liked the episode, said they missed it. I missed it too in a way. It is a lot easier to just do one wardrobe per episode, but I do like what versus mode brings to the table. So it's like a best of both worlds. The break is nice because then I'll be re-energized going back to it. But people seemed to receive this episode very well. The bit of feedback I had to sort of chuckle at was people saying it was well researched. And I chuckled at that. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate, I interpret that comment as the information was accurate. It was fact-filled and the facts were accurate. And cool, it was actually the least researched episode so far because it was mostly my lived experience playing video games and recalling the stuff I remembered at the time. Now, yes, there's a lot of history in that. But I didn't have to crack that many books for this one. It wasn't like going back and having to read de Beauvoir and Kant and Aristotle and Dwork and, right? Like stab me in the eye. This was just, that, like checking dates and things like that. But the meat of the episode was being able to sort of go back and relive gaming in the 80s, which was really cool. One of the things I think I do bring to the table, being a slightly older than average gamer, not by much, but slightly older than average gamer, is that I do remember the 80s. And I can, bring that contextual perspective of what it was like to see people fighting over the Ms. pronoun, the way people fight about not pronouns, sorry, prefix, the way people fight about pronouns now. And I think that's why the pronoun thing didn't hit me the same way it hit some people, because I'd already lived through the whole Ms. thing. And I remember people just going to pieces over Ms. That it was, what do you need that for? Language has to, all this, language has to mean something. All the same arguments people apply to the pronoun wars now came up in the debate over adding Ms. to Miss and Mrs. And, other people going, well, what's the big deal? And this, that, and the next thing, this has all happened before, this has all happened again. So that wasn't research. That was living it. The Carmen Sandiego and all that stuff, that was my life back then. And I remember gaming changing. There wasn't as much giving you the stink eye because you were a girl in the 80s. That started in the late 90s. I'll get into that in the 90s show, but there was a bit of, it was more like, not too many girls play video games, this is kind of cool, as opposed to, what do you know, you're a girl. I hadn't encountered that until kind of the Halo era. And so you can imagine how well I responded to, what do you know, you're a girl. It's like, boy, I turned into Kratos. Boy, I have been playing video games longer than you have been alive. There'll be God of War content next week. I'm playing that right now. But it's been interesting. Now, the 90s are going to be a completely different challenge. And I'll talk about this more as the episode gets closer. But going by decade, it's unfortunate because the console eras tend to land mid-decade. So there's no good place to cut it off. Because the Nintendo era started in 85. The Atari era started in 78-ish, which is why there was some overlap. And that's going to become an issue with the 90s episode, because developers like Corinne Yu, she started in the 90s. I mean, the Spec Ops game she worked on was 98. But so much of her prominent work product happened in the aughts, the early 2000s, that I'm leaning towards putting her in the 2000s show, so that there's more room for other content. Because I ended up with a list of 14 and managed to combine it down to 10 by lumping certain things together. But there's a lot to cover, in part because, while there were fewer prominent female developers, there was a lot going on screen. And then there were some very prominent female developers that most people don't know about. I am going to hold my fire for the episode because I'm really excited in sort of reintroducing some of these influential in ways people don't realize women who worked in gaming in the 90s. I'm excited about it. Can you think, do you want to do it now? But let's get to your feedback from the episode. Some people did take issue with the way I say, I'm going to try to say it properly according to the critics, Samus. I will admit that sounds too much like Samich and too Yankee for my personal comfort. I will try to make the change. No promises that it will be that it will stick. Pronunciation is an ongoing challenge up here in Canada because of our unique mix of cultures. I always have to second guess myself. You guys probably heard me do it a lot with Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, because up here, because of our French influence, we tend to default to the soft G. So Gerald, Geralt, but it's Gerard, because that's a strikingly English name. So there's just sort of things that feel weird and don't feel weird. It was just like Mario. Every kid I went to school with that name went by Mario because they were trying to adapt to the Canadian pronunciation. And if you said Mario, they thought you were making fun of their parents' accent. They were trying very hard to assimilate and speak English properly, because a lot of their older family members didn't speak English terribly well. And that's just my experience. So I'm very careful about adopting an accent that doesn't feel natural because of the sensitivities up here. And I recognize that those sensitivities are different than the ones in many parts of the US. Now, because my audience is primarily American, I aim to please you guys. So I will try to say Samus. Is that right? Even though it sounds really weird to me. Like, I went back and listened to the sparse voice acting in Metroid Other M. There actually isn't any canon descriptions of saying Samus's name in Nintendo games, and all of the reps, most of the reps in Canada are French Canadian that I deal with, and so I'm hearing Samus's name through an accent. Well, to them, I have the accent, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. But I will try. I just want to caution, just because you guys know I am very much about being nice and open-minded and kind to everybody. I assume you guys were joking and not super serious, that you were really offended by the way I said Samus. Is it Aaron? Aaron? I don't know. But you gotta watch that territory of bleeding into making fun of people's accents. I don't want to be a buzzkill. I don't want to be destroyer of fun. I'm just stating a slight discomfort I have with the way it was brought up. I can take it. I don't have a problem with it. I assume that it was just kibitzing. I do know some other people, especially other women, who would talk about games more, but for the fear of sounding dumb. And one of the things that drives me really crazy about this stuff, this frame looks weird. I don't like it. But one of the things that drives me crazy about this particular topic is the way men are socialized and women are socialized. I should say boys and girls, to communicate with each other what is considered rude, what is considered polite, what is considered friendly ribbing, and so on. It is exceptionally different. And I know this because when I was really young, we're talking first grade through fifth, sixth, no, even sixth, most of my friends were boys. It was only like 7th or 8th grade where that sort of gender divide happens, and then everybody has to go to their corners. But I had a real problem in the 7th and 8th grades because I was considered mean or bitchy, because my friends had been boys growing up, and you know how boys talk to each other. You shove back. It's kind of rough and tumble. We played this game called Red Ass, where you threw the ball and you had to catch it before REDASS. So you got 6 bounces before you earned a letter. And if you earned all the letters and spelled red ass, you have to stand against the wall and people whip the ball at your butt as hard as they possibly could. This is what passed for fun in the Jane Finch neighborhood in the 80s in Toronto. And then when I was forced to have female friends, I had to completely re-socialize. And to this day, it still feels like it feels fake to me. I don't mind the joking around, but a young woman who has been raised sex typical her entire life, it is so hard to adapt to the decidedly male socialization that comes with entertainment. And every time I go into a meeting, and it really is a challenge for business, right? Because you go into a meeting and the guys are all like, hey, what's with that? What dead animal grew on your face? If a guy has a goatee since a lot. And it's like, what are you wearing? A prison jumpsuit? And ha ha ha, slap their hands. How you doing, man? You know, it's this camaraderie building. And then it's almost like, hello, ma'am, you know? And it's this weird, awkward thing when there's a woman in the room because that male socialization doesn't extend to women. And it takes a while for the big money guys to become comfortable with, no, I can take a joke as much as anybody. No, women are not destroyers of fun. And that's something we really do have to overcome because every professional environment in gaming right now just feels like a pressure cooker because gaming took that sort of male camaraderie through insult, turned it into this exaggerated cartoon of itself through trash talk in multiplayer, and left female socialization so far in the dust that now nobody knows what to do. And this is really frustrating for me because I know a lot of women who are very smart about games, and I keep trying to encourage them to start talking and writing and all that stuff more, but they're socialized to believe that if people insult them, that is an indication that they have to change. And you can't do that. This is, I like to offer solutions. And this is something I am going to be exploring in the bonus episode. Oh, right. I forgot this because I hate doing it. Just a reminder that patrons do get access to that special Lady Bits bonus episode. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. The Patreon's been building nicely, so thank you. Please keep it up. That's been really, really helpful. So I'm going to leave that alone. That was sort of a tangent, but I think an important one. Something to keep in mind. But yeah, I will. Samus. That's right? Samus? Samus. See, it sounds like sandwich. Oh, God. It just seems so wrong. Anyway, most of the stuff was just very positive. People really liked it. Some people were too young to recognize that Carmen Sandiego started as a game, which was really interesting to me. That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. People in Europe checked me a little bit about saying the Western console market. They said the Western gaming market. I said the Western console market when I was talking to Atari Shock, the 83 crash. And yes, there was no console crash in Europe in 83. That's because there really wasn't the same sort of console culture in Europe in 83. Europe, as the commenter said, was microcomputers, which is what we call personal computers. It wasn't the same. So, yeah, that was an interesting bit of feedback because I did struggle with that in the scripting. Saying North American, North American, North American over and over and over again is too wordy. Saying American is not accurate because most of the things happen up here, and I don't want anybody accusing me of pretending to be American, and people will do that. But it's true that the West is not just America, but it was sort of the trend. And that I do understand the sensitivity because Europe tends to get left out in discussions of video game markets, and it is its own very unique market for video games, the games that sell well there. It's the same top 10, but the order is very different. It does drive gaming in some interesting ways. I mean, when a game gets censored or banned in a particular country within Europe, it affects practically all gaming in Europe because of the way the European Union works. And so if a game is censored in, say, Ireland or France or Greece, it will get censored everywhere in Europe. So it is its own thing. And I recognize that. And that's why I'm acknowledging the comment. It is just sort of sometimes you need to make the point quickly and sacrifice a tiny bit of accuracy just because you have to move on. It's frustrating to me. It was done consciously, so point taken. But yeah, just making that clear. I didn't want to. I responded in a comment, which I very rarely do, but in that case, I thought it was worthwhile because they did have a point. But yeah, that's one of those tricky things when you're trying to write fast. When you only have 2.5 minutes for every topic, brevity is often the enemy of accuracy. So, yeah. And a lot of the comments were interesting, some of them, and this was going to happen. And I was like, sometimes you just have to. There's such an elephant in the room on certain topics that it goes right back to tropes versus women. And sometimes I have to directly disagree with some of the assertions made by tropes versus women. And then it gets into this, who's better? And I see the two series as very different. For some people, tropes versus women was this big awakening. And I'm like, really? But I'm not going to judge. But other people felt very attacked by that show. And so I'm glad that people feel more represented by the way I approach a topic, because that was part of the goal in addressing the topics I'm addressing in the way I am, and very carefully disputing ideas and not people in an impersonal way. There is a way to say, factually, this is just completely out of context. I try to go more from a historical, contextual, anthropological approach, whereas tropes versus women is very much a sociology meets philosophy kind of thing. They say these very contentious things, intending to start conversation, and that's not where I'm at. That's where I was sort of at in my 20s. I've evolved past then. I think that we do have to deal with facts and all the facts, and I try to work on my theories and not dismiss inconvenient facts. So I'm glad people liked the fact that I brought up the criticisms of certain characters in the 80s and didn't take a lot of time arguing with them, but I did say, like, look, there's a contextual element to it that is being left out in some of these criticisms. And I really don't think that's fair. I really don't think it's fair to judge something from the 1970s and the 1980s by the standards of today. Symbols mean different things. And a symbol is not the same as a a social idea or an ideology. So I'm not going to say, oh, slavery in the time was completely acceptable. No, I don't mean that. No, the things that justified slavery when slavery was legal were excuses. Even there were a lot of people back then that didn't even agree with it. That is different than symbolism, because what we see as a strong woman today is symbolized differently than what it was in the 70s and 80s. And I'll get into a little bit of why, what changed, what happened in the 1990s show. The fact that our idea of a strong, independent woman looks so different now. There's a very real historical reason for that, and I will get into that in the 1990s show. One commenter did comment on the whole thing about the Samus bikini, see? That in the 80s, just showing a character with long hair, it wouldn't have been enough to indicate she was female because both men and women had long hair. Yeah, it's true. I alluded to that in the show, but yeah, there was no other way to really do it because characters didn't talk back then. What was it? Look, woman, Samus, woman. It's just shorthand. It was just shorthand. Video games are like stained glass windows that moved back then. Like I said, every topic in that show could have been its own half hour. But there was some interesting back and forth in the comments. I encourage you to go and read. I encourage you now. It is impossible to fit them all in, but if you have something you really want to see in the 90s show, speak now, because I am still solidifying the list. And if there was a big demand for something that I have moved or bumped down because so far there hasn't been the same interest in it, please say something now, because now's the time. After about mid next week, I'll have to firm it up because I have to write it. But yeah, if you're really passionate in seeing something, please say so now. The other thing that somebody commented on, and this is hilarious because it was completely unintentional, that my 80s character looked like Rogue from the X-Men. And that is hilarious because that was completely unintentional. That was the bustier from my Hawk Girl costume. Because all my actual, because the actual 80s look was lace, but that all looked way too lewd. It looked way too much like underwear, and YouTube is Puritan Central right now, so no way, not even going to chance it. But that jacket is the same jacket I used in the Lady Bits Kickstarter video. The original outfit I'd had was more like a Flashdance outfit. I was kind of inspired by Deadpool, but it looked really awful on camera, and Momo hated it. Momo was sort of like, get away from me until you change. And he was right. That outfit looked a lot better. But yeah, it does really look like unintentional Rogue cosplay. What can I say? Cosplay is sometimes not something you do. Cosplay is sometimes something you are. I can't help it. No matter what I do, I accidental cosplay. I've just sort of embraced it. That Dragon's Crown cosplay from a few episodes ago on women who work in gaming, just stuff in my closet. What does that say? Yeah, Cabbage Patch face. Haven't done that in a while. But yeah, next week is going to be God of War gameplay. And I'm going to tackle it the same way as sort of Far Cry 5. I'm still picking through the game. I'm having a blast, so I don't want to rush it because it is... I'll talk about this more next week, but there's some interesting design things going on that are kind of complex and neat, and I'm still chewing on them. And you guys know I love this. I love the gaming nerd. And you guys do too, which is what makes it so exciting that I can actually do this and you guys appreciate it instead of going, boring, too long, didn't read, you know. So that's next week. And like I said, please, 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 please get in anything you are super passionate about either female game developers in the 90s, or the character side I think is pretty much covered. I'm pretty much covering. I know what I want to cover with that, but that developer thing, there's some that are still sort of, where do I put this? So let me know. There are some, like I said, who I'm just going to push into the 2000s, just so that they can get more time. I'd rather give them their due than rush through it, just to get as many names as possible in one episode. And there were some people in the 80s that I am going to be pushing into the 90s because the bulk of their career was there. They were mentioned, but the bulk of their career, like when they sort of came into their own, was the 90s. So that's that. I'm going to stop now because it's been a half hour. Thanks for watching. Forgive my, kind of getting the rust off in terms of live videos. We'll be back next week like a bullet. No, I can't say that anymore. So that was a big thing. Number one, like a bullet. I don't even know what that even means, but that was the big radio DJ now. You can't say that now. Everybody's like, oh, mass shooter. That's how culture changes from decade to decade. Nothing we can do about it. Second Cabbage Patch phase. Have a great weekend, guys. Be back next week with game content.